The iron gates of Westridge Academy gleamed black under the summer sun, ornate and impenetrable. Through the bars, Giovanni Castelliano stood motionless, his expensive suit already soaked dark with sweat, his hands wrapped around the metal so hard his knuckles had turned the color of bone. He was a man who controlled Los Angeles with a signature and a nod. Men trembled when he entered rooms. Empires crumbled at his whisper. But right now, separated from his children by 40 feet of manicured courtyard and a locked gate, he was helpless. Behind him, Rocco and Theo shouted into radios, their voices cracking with a panic he had never heard before. The words came out fractured, urgent, meaningless. In the courtyard beyond the fence, 7-year-old Emma and Leo stood frozen beside a marble fountain, their school uniforms pristine, their faces small and terrified. And between them, holding both their shoulders like a shield, stood Douglas Hale. 34 years old, thin-shouldered, with the cheap swagger of a man who had never earned anything in his life. In his right hand he held a chrome pistol, its barrel catching the light. Behind Douglas stood Sophie Langford, her blonde hair swept back with a pearl clip that cost more than most people earned in a month. Her phone was raised, recording, a smile stretched across her face like a blade wrapped in ice. She was the kind of woman who destroyed people slowly, through whispered comments at galas and social exclusions that felt like death by 1,000 cuts. She had been humiliating Aria Voss for months, and now, standing in that courtyard with a madman holding a gun to Giovanni's children, she looked almost peaceful. Giovanni's voice came out like thunder through the gates. "Let them go. Whatever you want, let them go." Douglas laughed. A sound like breaking glass. "Your world is built on other people's suffering. I thought you should finally understand what that feels like." The courtyard went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Giovanni could see Emma's lips moving. She was counting. She always counted when she was afraid, 1, 2, 3, like her mother had taught her. His dead wife. Dead 8 years now, and still he could not bear the sound of his daughter's fear. Then everything stopped. A woman in a stained white diner uniform came sprinting across the courtyard from the eastern entrance. Her brown hair was escaping its ponytail. Her shoes were those cheap sneakers that waitresses wore, the soles already worn through. Her name was Aria Voss, and she was nobody. She cleaned tables for minimum wage. She worked double shifts at a place called Mel's that smelled like fryer grease and broken dreams. She was not supposed to be here. She had only come to drop off a lunch she could not afford to give to a teacher friend who had been kind to her in the past. She did not hesitate. She did not think about the gun. She did not think about Sophie Langford's cell phone still recording. She crossed that courtyard in a straight line and threw her entire body over both children, her arms wrapping around them like she could make herself bigger than bullets. 3 gunshots cracked the air. The sound was nothing like the movies. It was sharper, uglier, more final. Aria's body jerked once, twice, 3 times. Blood bloomed across her white uniform in dark circles that spread like spilled wine on fabric. Her shoulder first. Then her ribs. Then lower, across her abdomen. She did not scream. She wrapped her arms tighter around the twins and whispered into their hair, "Keep your eyes closed. Keep your eyes closed. Keep your eyes closed." The gun fell from Douglas's hand. Sophie's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the concrete. For one moment, the entire world seemed to pause between heartbeats. Then Giovanni was moving. The gates gave way under his hands like they were made of paper. He was a big man, 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle that had been shaped by rage and discipline. He crossed the courtyard faster than any of them could process. He gathered his children first, Emma still counting, Leo making no sound at all, and passed them backward to Rocco without looking away from Aria's face. She was already on the ground, her fingers still reaching for the children even as her body folded. Her eyes were open. Brown eyes, warm brown, the kind that looked like home to people with nowhere else to go. She was bleeding onto the cream-colored courtyard stones, and a man in an expensive suit was kneeling beside her, pressing his hands to her wounds like he could hold her together through sheer force of will. But what he did not know in that moment was that this single act would unravel everything. This nothing woman, this invisible waitress who had just taken 3 bullets meant for his children, had just changed the trajectory of his entire life. He did not know that in the next 3 weeks, he would move mountains to find her when she tried to disappear. He did not know that she would become the reason he finally chose to step back from the edge of the abyss he had been standing on for 15 years. He only knew that someone needed to stay with her. Someone needed to keep her eyes open. Someone needed to tell her that she was not invisible anymore. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. The next part of this story will change everything you thought you understood about power, about sacrifice, and about what happens when someone chooses to stay. Now let us go back to where this collision of worlds began. 3 weeks earlier. A summer night when lightning cracked the sky above a parking lot in East Los Angeles, and a woman counting coins in her car was about to make a choice that would echo through eternity. The diner called Mel's sat on the corner of 5th and Hollister, squeezed between a closed laundromat and a pawn shop that had been robbed twice in the last 6 months. The neon sign flickered and died and flickered again, casting everything below it in a sickly pink that made healthy skin look diseased. The parking lot was cracked asphalt, and a storm was coming. Aria Voss could smell it in the air, that particular electric smell that meant the sky was about to tear open and bleed rain onto the city. She sat in her 2003 Hyundai Elantra, the seats cracked from years of sun, the engine that had not run properly in 8 months. The car smelled like stale coffee and something underneath that she did not want to identify. In her hand she held $5 bills. 5. That was all she had left in the world. Her checking account showed negative $2.47. Her savings account no longer existed. $5 had to last 4 days. Milk was $3. Bread was $2.49. That left 41 cents for everything else, including gas to get to her second job on Thursday night. She was 28 years old and she looked like she was 45. Her dark hair had gray running through it now, fine silver threads that had started appearing 2 years ago during the custody fight with Douglas. Her brown eyes were ringed with violet shadows that no amount of sleep could erase. The skin under her chin was loose from weight loss, and her collarbone jutted out at an angle that looked wrong, brittle. She had calloused hands from years of washing dishes and carrying trays. She had a small scar on her left wrist that she did not talk about. She had 2 children. Marcus was 14 and lived with his father because Aria could not afford to keep him. He was angry with her about this, and he had every right to be. Jasmine was 12 and still lived with Aria in a studio apartment that cost $850 a month, which was more than half of what she made working doubles. The rain started to fall. Not gently. All at once, like the sky had opened up and poured itself onto the city. The parking lot began to flood. Water pooled in the lowest parts of the asphalt and started moving, carving rivers through the gravel and debris. Aria watched it happen and thought about the foreclosure notice that had arrived 3 weeks ago. $125,000 in back rent and legal fees. 7 days to respond or her apartment would be seized. She had 6 days left now. A sound cut through the rain. High-pitched, panicked. A child's scream. Aria was out of the car before her brain fully registered what she had heard. The rain hit her like a physical thing, cold and hard and immediate. Her work uniform clung to her skin, white blouse, black pants, the apron that smelled like fryer oil that no amount of washing could remove. The sound came again from the far corner of the lot. Near the storm drain. She ran toward it, her cheap sneakers splashing through puddles. Near the drain, the water had pooled into a small lake. And in that lake, barely visible, was a child. A girl, no more than 7 years old, with dark hair plastered to her head, her mouth open in a scream that seemed to come from somewhere underground. She was drowning in the storm drain. The grate had come loose. It happened sometimes in heavy storms, the pressure of the water pushing the metal grate up and away, creating a hole just big enough for a small body to slip through. The girl was flailing, her arms reaching upward into the rain, her eyes wide with the specific terror of a child who had never experienced fear before this moment. Aria did not think. She did not calculate risk. She did not weigh her own survival against someone else's. She waded into the water and reached down into that dark hole and grabbed the child under the arms and pulled. The girl was slippery with algae and terror. Her fingers clawed at Aria's arms, drawing blood. Aria pulled harder. The child came free with a sound like suction breaking. Aria stumbled backward with her, landing hard on the wet asphalt. The girl's name was Emma. She was 7 years old. She was from Westridge Academy, a private school that Aria had never even driven past. Her mother was dead. Her father was a man whose name meant nothing to Aria Voss, who had never read the newspapers that covered his rise to power in Los Angeles, who knew nothing of the empire he had built or the men who trembled before him. Emma coughed up water. She shook like a small animal in a thunderstorm. She held onto Aria with the grip of someone who had just been pulled back from the edge of the abyss and did not want to let go. "It is okay," Aria whispered. "You are safe. You are okay now. I have you." She held the child in the rain for a long time. Long enough for a black SUV to arrive in the parking lot. Long enough for men in dark suits to step out and move with the careful precision of people trained to handle emergencies. Long enough for everything to change, though she did not know it yet. She did not know that this child belonged to the most powerful man in Los Angeles. She did not know that her act of thoughtless courage would echo back through the weeks and months to come, that it would be the reason a man with the power of gods would kneel beside her and try to hold her together with his bare hands. She only knew that the child had stopped shaking. She only knew that Emma had stopped crying. And in a life of endless loss, that felt like grace. The black and white checkered floor of Rose's diner gleamed under fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects, and Aria Voss's fingers moved across the Formica counter in mechanical circles, wiping away the ghost of the dinner rush that had ended 3 hours ago. Her name tag read Aria in faded letters. Her uniform was the color of old cream, stained at the hem with coffee and something darker she had stopped trying to identify weeks ago. The clock above the kitchen door read 2:38 a.m. 13 minutes until her second shift ended. 13 minutes until she could walk back to her car, a 2009 Honda Civic with one working headlight and a check engine light that had been on since March, and drive to the apartment she shared with her 2 children, Marcus aged 9 and Lily aged 6, both asleep in a room they divided with a curtain because the second bedroom had been converted into storage for the things she could not afford to throw away. She had $5 in her apron pocket. $5.73 to be precise, but the 73 cents existed only in her phone's banking app, a number that felt more theoretical than real. Outside, Los Angeles pressed against the windows like something hungry. The summer heat had turned oppressive during the evening hours, the kind of thickness that made breathing feel like work. But now, as midnight had crept toward the desperate hours of early morning, the air had begun to shift. The sky above the parking lot held a color it did not usually hold, a bruised purple-gray that meant the atmospheric pressure was changing. The wind had picked up. The palm trees across the street bent and released, like they were practicing surrender. Aria did not notice any of this. She was thinking about Marcus's school supplies. The teacher had sent home a list. 23 items. Folders and pencils and a scientific calculator that cost $42. She had $47 saved for the entire month. The mathematics of it was a language she had become fluent in, the language of impossible choices. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up from her wiping, muscle memory stronger than exhaustion. An elderly man with rain already speckling his shoulders entered, shaking his head at the weather. He ordered coffee and pie. She poured the coffee. It was the third pot she had brewed that shift, and it had developed that particular bitterness that came from sitting too long, and cut him a slice of apple pie from the case, the last one from the afternoon bake. She set both in front of him without speaking. Her voice had worn thin by this hour. Through the diner's windows, the light from the parking lot flickered. The storm was coming faster than the weather had promised. At 2:51 a.m., the first drops began. Fat and heavy, they struck the asphalt with audible impact, sounding like something tapping on a tin roof. Then more came. Then the sky seemed to remember how to genuinely open, and the rain did not fall so much as collapse downward in sheets, transforming the parking lot into something like an ocean being poured from above. The elderly man watched the deluge with the expression of someone who had seen many storms and was no longer impressed by them. Aria's attention drifted. She was thinking about the phone bill. It was due in 4 days. If she did not pay it, she would lose her number, and her ex-boyfriend Douglas would use that as an excuse to claim she was avoiding his court-mandated visitation calls, which meant he would sue for full custody, which meant... A sound cut through her spiraling thoughts. Not loud, but sharp. A child's scream, thin and desperate, cutting through the percussion of rain on metal and concrete. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She dropped the rag. She did not think about her feet already aching from 14 hours standing. She did not think about her aching feet already hurting at the counter. She did not think about anything at all. She moved toward the door, and the elderly man watched her go with the expression of someone watching a person make a choice they would either thank themselves for or regret forever, but there was no way to know which until afterward. The rain hit her like a physical blow. It was warm, almost body temperature, and it soaked through her uniform in seconds. The parking lot was transformed. Where there should have been discrete spaces and painted lines, there was now a river, shallow but urgent, flowing toward the storm drain at the far corner. The gutters could not handle the volume of water. The drain could not keep pace. Water was backing up, pooling, rising. And caught in the metal grate of that drain was a small figure. A child. 7 years old, perhaps, wearing a soaked pink backpack and a school uniform from a place Aria had never been. Her leg, the right one, was wedged between the metal bars of the grate, and the water was rising around her waist, and she was screaming with the kind of pure terror that belongs only to children who are certain they are about to die. Aria did not think. The thinking part of her brain, the part that calculated rent and school supplies and custody battles, went silent. She ran into the water. It was colder than it looked, and it pulled harder than it should have. The current was stronger than seemed possible for a parking lot drain. It tried to sweep her legs out from under her. She staggered, recovered, pushed forward. "I have you," she called out, not sure if the child could hear her over the rain and her own screaming. "I have you. You are safe." She reached the drain. The water was at her own thighs now. The child's name, she would learn later, was Emma. The child's father was a man named Giovanni Castellano, and his name meant nothing to her in that moment, meant nothing at all. The grate was slick. Her fingers found no purchase. She tried pulling the child upward, but the child's leg would not come free. The metal was old and rough, and it had caught on something, the fabric of her uniform, or her skin, or both. "I need you to push," Aria said, her voice steady even though steady was a lie she was telling with her mouth while terror was screaming through every other part of her body. "Can you push your leg down and toward me? Try to twist it." The child pushed. The child twisted. The water continued rising. Aria could feel it pulling at her own clothes now, pulling with genuine force, asking her to let go, to save herself, to stop this. She pulled harder. The child's leg scraped against the metal. She heard something tear, the uniform, she hoped, not the skin, and then the child came free with a sound like suction breaking, like something being pulled from deep earth. Aria stumbled backward with Emma in her arms, landing hard on the soaked asphalt. The air knocked from her lungs. The child was coughing, gasping, her small body convulsing as she expelled water. Aria held her upright, one hand supporting her back, the other smoothing wet hair from her face. "You are safe," Aria whispered. "You are okay now. I have you." She held the child in the rain for what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes. Long enough for the elderly man from inside the diner to come out and stand under the awning, watching. Long enough for 2 other customers to join him, all 3 of them just watching, just standing, doing nothing. long enough for the rain to ease slightly, as if the sky was tired from its own fury. And then the headlights arrived. They cut through the storm like blades. 3 black SUVs, moving in formation with the precision of a military unit, pulling into the parking lot in a way that suggested the parking lot did not belong to the diner anymore but to them. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements economical, trained, the movements of people accustomed to violence and the prevention of violence, and the distinction between those two things was something they understood in ways that Aria did not. A man emerged from the lead vehicle. He was tall, 6'3", perhaps 6'4", and his hair was dark with threads of silver at the temples. A scar ran along his jawline from his left ear almost to his chin, white against his olive skin. His suit was Tom Ford, charcoal grey, tailored so precisely that it must have cost more than Aria made in a month. It was also soaked. His eyes were the colour of storm clouds. Those eyes found Emma first. They softened, and the softening was so unexpected, so sudden, that it seemed to crack something in the man's face that had been sealed for a very long time. He moved toward them quickly but without rushing, if such a thing was possible, deliberately fast, each movement controlled and intentional. Emma. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Emma, I am here. You are okay now. He knelt beside the child, his expensive suit pressing into the wet asphalt. His hands checked her for injuries with the gentleness of someone who knew 1,000 ways to cause pain and had chosen, for this moment, to cause none. Emma began to cry, the real crying, the kind that comes only when you feel safe enough to feel afraid. The man stood. His eyes moved to Aria, and the softness that had been there for his daughter seemed to crystallize into something else, something that was not soft at all, but that was directed not at her but past her, toward some invisible target in the rain-soaked distance. "Who are you?" he asked. "Aria," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her uniform was plastered to her skin. Her hands were cut from the metal grate, bleeding small ribbons of red into the rain. "My name is Aria Voss. She was drowning. She was stuck, and I." "What is your name?" the man asked again, as if she had not already answered, as if he needed to hear it twice to make it real. "Aria Voss." One of the men who had emerged from the SUVs, younger, with a neck tattoo visible above his collar, moving with the casual violence of someone who did this kind of work regularly, leaned close and whispered something. The man who was kneeling did not turn. His eyes stayed on Aria. "This is my daughter," he said. "Her name is Emma Castellano. Her mother died when she was 3 years old. She is my only child, and she was drowning in a storm drain, and a stranger pulled her out of that water and did not ask for anything in return." "Did you ask for anything in return?" "No," Aria said. "No," he repeated. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a card. It was cream-colored, expensive, with letters embossed in gold. He withdrew a pen from his other pocket and wrote a number on the back of the card, then handed both to her. "My name is Giovanni Castellano. If you ever need anything at all, you call this number. You understand me?" She took the card because refusing seemed like it would be more complicated than accepting. "I understand. But I don't want." "You do not have to want anything," he said quietly. "The wanting is not your responsibility. The responsibility is mine now." He turned back to Emma, and Emma reached for him, and he lifted her and held her against his chest, and over his shoulder his men moved with silent precision back to the SUVs. In less than 2 minutes, they were gone. The parking lot was empty except for Aria and the 3 customers who had watched from under the awning and the elderly man who had ordered pie. She stood in the rain with Giovanni Castellano's card in her bleeding hand. She looked at the number he had written. She did not know who this man was. She did not read the newspapers that covered his rise to power. She did not know about the empire he had built or the men who trembled before him or the life he had taken or the lives he had saved depending on what angle you viewed his story from. She only knew that a child had been drowning, and she had pulled that child free, and a man had appeared like something from another world entirely and had looked at her for 4.2 seconds and had decided something in that brief span of time that would alter the entire trajectory of what came next. She tucked the card into her apron pocket, beneath the $5.73. She wrung out her hair. She went back inside Rose's diner to finish her shift, which had only 14 minutes remaining. But what she did not know, what she could not have known, was that Giovanni Castellano had already made a decision in the parking lot. He had decided that Aria Voss was under his protection now, which meant that anyone who tried to harm her had just volunteered to experience the full weight of his response, which meant that the man currently watching her apartment building from across the street, Douglas Hale, her ex-boyfriend, a man with fists like hammers and a custody order he used like a weapon, had made the last mistake of his life. The rain continued to fall. The fluorescent lights of Rose's diner hummed their dying song at 11:37 in the evening. The rain hammered against the windows, and the parking lot outside was a river of black asphalt reflecting neon. Aria Voss pushed through the kitchen door in her waitress uniform, the hem stained with coffee from a spill 2 hours ago, her hair still damp from pulling Emma Castellano out of the flooding storm drain 5 days before. She did not know yet what this shift would cost her. She did not know that in 38 minutes, a man with eyes like winter steel would walk through that door and see her broken. Ray Dennison, the diner's owner, 62 years old with kind eyes and a limp from a construction accident that took his left foot, looked up from the register. The coffee pot fell from his hands. It shattered on the black and white checkered floor, and neither of them moved to clean it. Her left eye was swollen completely shut, purple bleeding into black, the color spreading across her cheekbone like a bruise that refused to stop spreading. Handprint marks circled her throat, 5 distinct fingers pressed into her skin deep enough to leave crescents, a necklace made of violence. Her split lip was fresh, blood running down her chin in a thin line. "Aria," Ray whispered. She tried to smile. The cut reopened. She tasted copper and salt. "I am fine," she said, but her voice came out wrong, wheezing like something inside her chest was broken. She stumbled toward booth 3, the corner table where she always sat during her 15-minute break, and she did not make it. Her knees gave. Ray caught her, his good arm hooking around her waist, and he lowered her onto the vinyl seat like she was made of glass that might shatter. She leaned her head against the booth back and closed her right eye. "What happened?" Ray's voice shook. She did not answer for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked past 11:40. The only other customer was an elderly man in the corner nursing pie he had ordered 3 hours ago. "Douglas found me," Aria whispered. "Behind my building. By the alley where the dumpsters are." Ray's hand tightened on her shoulder. "He said I humiliated him. With a restraining order." Her breath came shallow, like every inhalation sent lightning through her ribs. "Cracked ribs," Ray was already thinking. "He said next time he will make sure I do not walk away." He said, she stopped. Started again. "He said things about my children." Ray Dennison had owned Rose's Diner for 31 years. He had watched this neighborhood transform. He paid protection money to a man named Giovanni Castellano because everyone in Los Angeles with a business in this part of the city paid Giovanni Castellano, and in return, things like Douglas Hale did not happen to people who worked in establishments under that protection. But Douglas Hale had never cared about protection money or neighborhood boundaries. Douglas Hale had only ever cared about owning Aria Voss, and when she escaped him, he had decided that if he could not own her, he would destroy her. Ray walked to the telephone mounted on the wall behind the counter. He dialed a number he had never dialed before in 18 years of protection payments. "This is Ray Dennison from Rose's Diner on 3rd and Elm," he said to whoever answered. "I need to speak to Mr. Castellano. It is urgent." The voice on the other end did not ask questions. Ray was placed on hold for exactly 2 minutes. Then a man's voice, deep and solid like an oath, said simply, "I am listening." "There is a woman here," Ray said. "Aria Voss. She works for me. She is hurt. Bad. And the man who did it. Where is she now?" "Booth 3. "But her ribs?" Rocco will be there in 38 minutes with a doctor. Do not call an ambulance. Do not call police. Keep her warm. Keep her conscious. Do not let her leave. The line went dead. Aria's right eye opened as Ray returned and sat beside her in the booth. I called someone, he said. Someone who can help. Who? But she already knew. She had Giovanni Castelliano's card in her apron pocket, the one he had written his personal number on in the parking lot 5 days ago. She had not called it. She had been afraid of what calling it would mean, what debt she would owe, what kind of man would answer. Someone who matters more than the police, Ray said. The rain continued to fall outside. A car pulled up, slowed, then drove past. Douglas Hale, watching from across the street, calculating his next move. At exactly 11:58 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Rocco emerged first, tall and broad-shouldered, his suit tailored perfectly, his eyes scanning the diner with the efficiency of a man trained to identify threats. He opened the passenger door. Giovanni Castelliano stepped out into the rain without flinching, his navy cashmere coat worth more than Aria's annual salary hanging open over a tailored shirt. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. His scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a line that made his face look like something carved rather than grown. He crossed the parking lot. The elderly man in the corner with the pie suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be and left $7 on the table. Giovanni entered the diner. He saw Aria hunched in booth 3, barely conscious, that fierce woman who had jumped into a storm drain for a child she did not know, now broken and bleeding and trying not to cry. Rocco's hand moved toward his jacket. Giovanni raised one hand. Wait. He approached slowly, like she was a wounded animal who might bolt. He did not touch her. He knelt beside the booth at her eye level, and when he spoke, his voice, which had ordered men's deaths with less emotion than most people order coffee, went soft. Who did this to you? He asked. She tried to lie. Her body was shaking too hard to manage it. Douglas Hale, she whispered. My ex. He followed me from work. He said he was going to. She stopped. Touched her throat. He said I humiliated him. Giovanni's jaw tightened. Rocco saw it, and in that moment, Rocco understood that something had shifted in the world, that whatever was happening here was not a routine problem but something else entirely. I am not the police, Giovanni said. Aria looked at him, trying to understand what that meant, trying to decide if accepting help from a man like him made her complicit in whatever came next. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he was deciding something. And then she made her own calculation. Survival mattered more than morality. I cannot pay you, she whispered. You saved my daughter's life. The debt is mine. A black sedan pulled into the parking lot behind the SUV. A doctor emerged, carrying a leather bag. Rocco opened the door to a back room, and the doctor moved Aria to a medical examination table set up in what was normally the employee break room. Giovanni waited outside, his coat still wet from the rain, while the doctor stitched her split eyebrow and confirmed the ribs were cracked but not broken. Rocco stood guard at the door. What Aria did not know, what she could not have seen, was what was happening 3 blocks away on Maple Street. Giovanni's voice, when he called, sounded like the voice of a man ordering a business transaction. I need to have a conversation with Douglas Hale. Find him. They found him in a bar on 5th Avenue, exactly where he always went to drink away his rage at a woman who had dared to leave him, who had dared to get a restraining order, who had dared to move forward with her life. A man approached him in the bathroom. Whispered something in his ear. Douglas laughed, because Douglas Hale was stupid, the kind of stupid that comes from never facing real consequences. The man left. Douglas never did leave that bathroom. By the time Aria was dressed and handed a bottle of painkillers by the doctor, Giovanni had already decided what came next. He had decided that anyone who tried to harm her had just volunteered to experience the full weight of his response. He had decided that Aria Voss, this woman who pulled drowning children from storm drains and refused money and spoke about her dead grandmother like she was teaching a class on survival, was under his protection now. "You will stay somewhere safe," he told her. "An apartment above a bakery on Merino Street. Rocco will drive you there. You will rest. In 1 week, when your ribs are healed enough, your children will join you." "Why?" she asked. "Because," Giovanni said, "the people who did this believed you were nobody. And that belief needs to be corrected." He turned to leave. She called after him. "Thank you." He did not turn around. But Rocco saw his shoulders straighten, and in that moment, Rocco understood that something dangerous had been awakened in his boss, something that had been frozen since his brother Dante's betrayal 15 years ago, something that might change everything that came next. The rain fell. The city moved. And in a Beverly Hills restaurant, a blonde woman named Sophie Langford was receiving photographs on her phone. Word count, 1,847. The rain falls against the hospital window. Aria's eyes flutter open, and the first thing she sees is white ceiling, white walls, white bandages wrapped around her ribs like the wrappings on a mummy, like the shells of something that was once alive but is no longer certain it survived. Her left shoulder throbs. Her left side is on fire. Her abdomen feels like someone placed hot coals beneath her skin. She tries to breathe and the pain cuts through her like a blade through silk, and she understands in that moment that she is alive because 3 bullets missed what they were supposed to hit, and she is alive because her body moved faster than her mind could tell it to be afraid. Giovanni sits in a chair beside her bed. He has not moved in 11 hours. His suit is still perfectly tailored, still pressed, still commanding, but his face is older than it was 3 days ago, aged by 11 hours of sitting motionless in a hospital room, watching to make sure she kept breathing. His eyes open when she stirs. "The children," Aria whispers. Her voice comes out like gravel dragged through broken glass. "Safe," Giovanni says. His voice is steady, deep, and solid like an oath. "Because of you." She closes her eyes. The pain is enormous, a living thing inside her chest, but it feels distant now, like it belongs to someone else's body. She thinks about Emma's face in that moment before she threw herself over the twins, thinks about Leo's small hands gripping her uniform, thinks about how her grandmother taught her to be strong for everyone else, and somehow, across all the years and all the suffering, it mattered. It actually mattered. Giovanni reaches for her hand. His fingers are warm. She can feel the weight of his gold rings, expensive metal that costs more than she has earned in a year. He holds her hand like it is the most fragile thing in his world. "Rest," he tells her. She cannot rest. Her mind is fractured, scattered across too many moments at once, the gate breaking beneath Giovanni's hands, Douglas collapsing, the screaming, the blood that was hers, that came from her body as if her body had decided it would give everything, take nothing, protect what could not protect itself. Outside the hospital room, Rocco and Theo stand guard. They have stood there for 11 hours as well. In the hallway, detectives tried to ask questions about the shooting at the private school, about Douglas Hale and Sophie Langford, about how many shots were fired and from which angle and why a Mafia boss and his lieutenants happened to be at a school that employed Giovanni's daughter Emma and his nephew Leo. The detectives left. They do not ask those questions twice. By morning, the news breaks across every channel. Douglas Hale, federal fugitive, wanted in 4 states, arrested at St. Michael's Private Academy in Los Angeles. 40 years in federal prison. No parole. The mugshot shows a man whose face has collapsed inward, whose eyes have finally understood that actions have consequences, that women do not actually belong to men, that the world does not revolve around his rage. Sophie Langford's video spreads faster than disease. The footage of her laughing as Douglas raised the gun, narrating the moment like she was commentating on a sporting event, watching the trash get taken out, reaches 500,000 people in the first hour. By 3 in the afternoon, 2 million. By evening, every news outlet in the country has run it. Her country club votes unanimously to revoke her membership. Her charity board sends her a letter of termination. Her husband, a venture capitalist worth $60 million, files for divorce and ensures she receives nothing but the deed to a house in Pasadena that is mortgaged to the limit. But the real destruction arrives federal, wrapped in subpoenas and indictments. Giovanni's connections at the FBI are the ones he cultivated for exactly this purpose, the ones he has spent years building with precision and patience, have constructed a case against Sophie's father's corporation. $12 million in laundered money flowing through her foundation. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Conspiracy. Sophie is arrested at dawn in her silk pajamas, Chanel slippers on her feet, a diamond bracelet on her wrist, all of it meaningless now. Meaningless because money cannot protect you from the law, cannot erase video evidence, cannot undo the moment you chose to film a child being shot at for your social media audience. The handcuffs click around her wrists. Cameras flash. She screams about lawyers, about lawsuits, about how this is not fair, this is not how things work, people like her do not go to prison. But they do. Sometimes they do. Sometimes the universe decides to correct itself all at once. Giovanni watches both arrests from a leather chair in the hospital's private waiting room. His men bring him coffee. He does not drink it. He watches the news unfold, Douglas begging on the courthouse steps, Sophie being led into a federal building in handcuffs, and something in his chest releases, something that has been coiled tight since the moment he could not reach her in time. He returns to her room. She is sleeping now, her face peaceful in a way it has not been peaceful in years. The morphine drip feeds medicine into her arm. Her bandages are white. Her breathing is shallow but steady. In her apartment on Merino Street, above the bakery where the owner has been checking on her plants and her children, something waits. A letter. Handwritten online paper. Hidden inside the margins of her grandmother's recipe book, the one with the coffee-stained pages and the notes in Rosa's careful script about resilience and protection and what it means to be strong when the world is taking everything from you. The letter is dated 3 days before the shooting. 3 days before the moment Aria decided that Emma and Leo were worth more than her own life. She had written that letter in the dark, at 3 in the morning, because she had made a decision. She was going to disappear. She was going to pack a single suitcase with her children's clothes and take them to her sister in Arizona and vanish from Giovanni's world entirely, because she had finally understood that staying near him meant he was in danger. A mafia boss cannot protect a woman without making enemies of everyone who hates her enemies. A mafia boss cannot love a woman without putting every person he loves at risk. So she had written the letter. Confessed everything on that lined paper, how she fell, how her heart moved toward him even though her mind screamed that it was wrong, that loving a dangerous man was like loving a sword and hoping it would not cut. How she was leaving to protect him. How she would write when she was safe, if the world allowed it. How she would never forget. The letter sits in the recipe book. Waiting. Giovanni does not know about the letter yet. But in the morning, when he goes to her apartment to retrieve something she asked for, a photograph of her grandmother, the one taken in 1952 before Rosa knew what loss was, he will open the recipe book to look for the photo. He will find the letter tucked inside the back cover. He will read it standing in Aria's small kitchen, with the sunrise coming through the window, and something in him will break and rebuild simultaneously. Aria's eyes open again in the dark. Giovanni is still beside her. He has never left. He will not leave. She understands this without being told, the way you understand certain things without language, the way you know when someone has decided that you are worth the risk. Thank you, she whispers. He leans close. You have nothing to thank me for, he says. You saved my children. They were not my children, she says. And yet you protected them like they were the only things in the world that mattered, he says. That is what love is, Aria. Not biology. Not ownership. It is choice. It is deciding that someone else's safety matters more than your own survival, and then living that decision even when it costs you everything. She closes her eyes. The pain is still there, but it feels different now. It feels earned. It feels like proof that she lived, that she chose, that in a moment when she could have run, she did not run. Outside, the Los Angeles night stretches vast and indifferent. Somewhere in the federal detention center, Douglas Hale sits in a cell knowing he will die there. Somewhere in another facility, Sophie Langford holds a phone call with a public defender who informs her that her sentence will likely be 8 to 12 years, minimum. The world has moved. Justice has arrived, not as punishment, but as correction. Not as death, but as consequence. The rain stops. The night deepens. And in a hospital room in Los Angeles, a man who commands empires sits beside a woman who commands nothing but her own choices, and he watches her breathe, and he understands that this moment, this witness, this presence, is the only power that has ever mattered. The hospital room is silent except for the rhythm of machines counting her heartbeat. Aria Voss lies in the pale grey light of early morning, her left shoulder wrapped in white bandages that have begun to show small blooms of red underneath. 2 weeks have passed since the bullets. 2 weeks since her body became a shield. Her breathing is shallow, careful, because anything deeper sends lightning through her ribs. The morning nurse, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes, changes the 4 bag and does not ask questions about the armed men who sit in the waiting room around the clock. Aria's children visit at 3 o'clock every afternoon. Carlos, her 7-year-old, sits on the edge of the bed without touching her, afraid he might break what is already broken. Maya, 5 years old, brings drawings she has made in the hospital daycare, stick figures holding hands, a yellow sun, bright colors for sad days. The children understand something has shifted in the world. They understand that the scary man who used to come to their apartment will not come anymore. They do not yet understand the cost of that safety. Giovanni arrives at 5. He has never missed a day. He brings books, nothing heavy, nothing demanding, and sits in the chair beside her bed with the patience of a man who has learned that time itself can be a gift. Today he brings tea from the Italian market downtown, the kind her grandmother used to make. The smell of chamomile and lemon fills the small room like a prayer nobody asked for but everyone needed. The doctor said you can move your arm, he says. Not a question. He knows everything the doctors say before they say it. A little, Aria whispers. Her voice is still broken, still tender. The bruises around her throat are fading from purple to yellow to something almost invisible. Almost. He sets the tea on the bedside table and pulls his chair closer. Emma has been asking about you. She wants to know if you are coming home. Home. The word sits between them like a dangerous thing. Aria closes her eyes. She knows what he is doing. She knows he is trying to build a future out of borrowed moments in a hospital room. She knows this cannot continue. That evening, after Giovanni leaves, after the nurses dim the lights, Aria asks for paper and a pen. Patricia brings her a yellow notepad and a ballpoint pen that barely works. Aria's hand shakes as she writes. Her grandmother's pen would be better, but her grandmother's pen is locked in the recipe book that sits in a drawer beside her bed, the only thing she brought with her besides the clothes on her back and 2 children who are slowly learning to trust that trauma has an ending. She writes for an hour. The words come slowly, each one a small death. Giovanni, I need you to understand why I am leaving. She stops. She crosses out the line. She starts again. I cannot stay in your world. She writes until her hand cramps and her shoulder screams and she has to stop because pain is the only honest thing left. She writes the truth, that she loves him. That she has loved him since the night in the parking lot when he held his son like the child was made of light instead of bone. That she will always love him. That loving him is exactly why she must leave. By 4 in the morning, when the nurses change shifts and the hospital breathes its deepest sleep, Aria folds the letter carefully. She places it on the bed. She pulls on the clothes someone, Rocco, probably, or maybe Giovanni himself, brought from her apartment. Everything fits differently now. Everything feels borrowed. She tucks her grandmother's recipe book under her arm. The weight of it is almost unbearable. The parking garage is empty and grey. Her sister's borrowed car sits 3 rows back, keys hidden above the visor. Aria has made it 7 steps when a voice stops her like a hand against her chest. You were not going to say goodbye. Giovanni stands between two concrete pillars, the morning darkness wrapped around him like a coat. He holds a piece of yellow paper. The letter. His jaw is tight enough to snap. Rocco found it, he says. 10 minutes after you left the room. He called me immediately. I have been standing here, waiting to see if you would actually walk away or if you would choose different. Aria cannot speak. Her throat tightens in a way that has nothing to do with the bullets. Did you mean it? Giovanni steps toward her. Each step is deliberate, controlled. The part about loving me. She could lie. She has lied before. She could run. The car is close enough to reach. Instead, she nods. Tears come without permission, without dignity. He closes the distance between them in 4 steps. Up close, his eyes are not the color of storms. They are the color of something breaking open. I have spent 15 years not trusting anyone outside my blood, he says. His voice is different now, stripped of all protection. 15 years choosing survival over everything else. My brother taught me that lesson when he betrayed me. I learned it well. I learned it so well that I forgot how to choose anything else. Aria's grandmother's recipe book feels heavier with every second. Then you came, he continues. You pulled my daughter from the water. A stranger's child. A child that was not yours, that gave you nothing, that cost you everything. And you did not hesitate. She starts. You make me want to choose something different, he says. You make me want to be the man my daughter thinks I am when she looks at you. I do not care if you are a liability. I do not care if you complicate my life. I do not care if there are men who will use you against me. I care that you threw yourself over my children when you had every reason to run. I care that you wrote me a goodbye letter because you thought leaving would keep me safe. No one has tried to keep me safe since my brother died. The parking garage is so quiet you can hear the fluorescent lights humming above them. I am just a waitress, Aria says. He reaches out and takes her hand. His palm is warm. His grip is gentle in a way that power usually is not. You are the woman I trust, he says. That is more than I have given anyone in 15 years. Stay. Please. Not because I command it. Not because I can protect you. Stay because you choose to. Stay because staying is hard and you have decided it matters anyway. Aria looks at the letter in his hand. She looks at her grandmother's recipe book still clutched against her chest. She thinks about the note written in the margin in her grandmother's careful handwriting. A family is not just the people you are born to. It is the people who choose to stay when staying is hard. She does not run. She does not leave. She walks back into the hospital with him, and when they reach her room, he sits in his chair again, and she lies in her bed, and neither of them says another word because some choices do not need explanation. 6 months pass. Time moves in a way that feels like healing. Aria works 2 nights a week at the diner because Ray needs her and because she refuses to forget what it feels like to be invisible. Her children and Giovanni's twins share weekends filled with noise and safety and the kind of love that does not require proof. Douglas Hale sits in a federal detention center in Colorado, 40 years without parole. Sophie Langford is in minimum security, her empire of cruelty dismantled, her name erased from the places that once whispered it with fear. On a Tuesday evening, Aria stands in Giovanni's kitchen. Her grandmother's recipe book lies open on the marble counter. Giovanni reads the margin notes aloud as he teaches Emma how to make minestrone soup, the real kind, the kind that tastes like survival. The best meals, he reads, are made with whatever you have left. He looks at Aria. He smiles in that way he only smiles when his children are not watching, almost shy, almost like a man learning to be gentle for the first time. Later, after the children sleep, he walks her to her car. The Los Angeles night stretches above them, stars hidden behind city light but still there, still burning. I have been thinking about your grandmother, he says. About chosen family. About how the strongest bonds are not written in blood but in choice. Aria kisses him. When she pulls away, she says, "Thank you for finding me before I could leave." He says, "Thank you for staying when leaving would have been easier." This is the lesson that these two people teach the world, that family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. That love is not something that happens to you. It is something you decide, over and over, in moments when you could walk away but choose to stand. If this story touched something inside your heart, if you recognized yourself in either of these people, drop a like right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that real strength is not what you can take but what you give when you have nothing left. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Comment below, would you have jumped into the flood for a stranger's child? Your answer matters. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you in the next story.